So let's start with a story, right? Because we're talking about storytelling. Can each of you, and this is for everybody, tell us about a moment where storytelling made a difference? Either hiring someone, attracting funds, or closing a deal, where storytelling, or you believe storytelling made a difference. Where do I start from? Okay, they say you should start from here. All right.
All right, thanks. A pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. There are so many stories. I would even struggle from where to start from, but I think one very interesting one that I can recall, for those of us that follow the fintech space, there's this fintech map that gets released every January by the CEO of, I think it's Anchor. And, every year that list was coming out and we're not on that list. We've been maybe 2 or 3 years in business and we never got on that list. In fact, I was talking to some investors and they were looking at all the fintechs in Nigeria, and Sycamore was not on that list, right? And they were like, are you guys not doing good work? Why are you not on the fintech list? And that particular year, we had won awards, we had done a good few things, and I was wondering what's going on. And the list came out when we're still not there. And I remember taking the list. I edited the fintech map and I added Sycamore in it. And I wrote a very interesting story of, how, we'd done all these things, we won awards, we raised this money, we got into this, and still we didn't get on that list. And that it must be village people that prevented us from getting on the list, and then we'll try again next year. And it's funny how viral that post went, right? It went so viral that even the investor from Kenya then saw it, and the person that actually made the list actually reached out to me and we became friends, right? And it's so interesting how simple that thought was. And interestingly, when he saw me, he was so excited to meet me and even become my friend, because he was like, typically when people don't get on the list, they take an adversarial, combative stance of, oh, why didn't you put me on the list? And we're angry, this and I didn't do that. I just made a joke about it and said, well, God did, next time we'll get on it. And from that list, we started getting on all the other fintech lists and maps going forward, and we got recognized by a bunch of people through a very simple LinkedIn story. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So for me, I think Middleman has like an interesting story when it comes to fundraising. I remember in 2023 when we started out, we wanted to raise a family and friends round, and for context, my co-founder and I, this is not to like tell a grass to grace story, but we don't have like the rich uncles or the rich parents that could like give us money to start. So we had to look to into our network and get the money from people, right? So we wanted to raise $25,000 at the time. And I remember that we had raised 11K. So we needed $40,000 to complete the round. And so we approached an investment club, and they were supposed to like put the money together, members of the club. All of a sudden, we just got an email that said one single person was willing to give us the entire 14K check. Up to today, I haven't met this person physically, right? I did not know this person from anywhere. And so after having conversation with the person, and we're like, why are you doing this? Why are you the only one taking up this check? And it was like, he has been following our journey. He has been following our story. So right, even before we started Middleman, my co-founder and I have worked in different startups, and we've been very active online, on LinkedIn, sharing our journey, sharing our story. And this is what this person has been following for years. And also, even before the product launched, my co-founder would write about what we were building, why we were doing it, where we were coming from, the impact we were trying to make. And those are the stories that this person followed over the years before he was able to make that decision, right? And also for us, when it comes to like hiring, apart from the people that we handpicked from the beginning to say that these are the founding members of the team, every other person, who are all fantastic, by the way, have been people who reached out from just seeing us online, seeing what we are building and wanting to be a part of it, and reach out to say, oh, I love what you guys are building. This is my skill. This is how I can contribute. And then we set up calls, have interviews, and employ these people, right? So we've never actually have to put out a public application to say that we are hiring. Everything comes from people just loving what we are building. Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. You can clap, you can clap.
Yeah, those are powerful stories. I almost forgot the question. The question is, a time storytelling helped us do something, right? I mean, yeah, if you know me, you know that I'm a storyteller. I just like talking, right? And you know, where I do the talking, I'm sure you guys guessed it. It's on Twitter. I used to be a big LinkedIn guy many years ago. I used to go and write all my stories on LinkedIn. And I realized that, you know, I have LinkedIn phobia till today, right? I realized that writing on LinkedIn, first of all, forced me to communicate in a way that was very straitjacket, right? I'm trying to tell you this and all of that. And the result of that is that it attracted people also with that kind of mindset. So people coming at you in a very formal sort of way. So I started to change my strategy around 2019 back then, and then just talking about my daily life, right? You know, 2019 into 2020, 21, after the lockdown period and all of that, when we wanted to launch the company, or in fact, we had already launched and we're bootstrapped. So I just used to talk about my struggles, right? We closed a great deal today, but somebody resigned, right? Or, you know, we achieved some progress, but we are struggling. We lost to another competitor in a bid or something like that. So and to be honest, in the early days, when people meet me and say, I know your company because you talk about this on Twitter, I used to be surprised because my Twitter is basically me talking to myself, right? I'm just documenting my thoughts, I'm just writing. Apparently people were following these stories and sort of just understood and could see themselves in my position, right? And see, oh, I remember even people that were ahead were like, actually, I understand where you are today. And what that helped was, you know, one of the stories I've not told before is that there was somebody on Twitter who I did not even know had the capacity to invest in companies, right? He just used to interact with me. He'll laugh at my jokes or retweet my points of view and things like that. And I think one day he said something, okay, he posted a bottle of perfume that he bought. And that perfume is very expensive. Like, this Bobo get money. Oh. So when it was time to raise, I just sent him a message. And it was like, yeah, I think I'm, without even going through your deck, I think I have a clear idea of what you are going through. And I'll write you a check. And he wrote me a check for $5,000. So yeah, that helps.
Wow. That's powerful. Now let's shift from that to like more specific moments around building. Go to Omolara, and then after that, other panelists can chip in. What was your angle? What was your story you were telling or fundraising, and how did you refine it? How to refine it?
Okay, so I think for us, it was very important for us to tell the story of where we were coming from, which is the fact that my co-founder and I used to run e-commerce businesses for about 5 years. And so all of the problems that Middleman currently solves today are things that we had experienced. So it was important to tell that story to help investors see that we actually know what we are talking about. We know exactly how this problem should be solved. We've been there, we've done that. And we also told the story of how we have basically worked for startups all our lives. I was the very first employee at Catalog. My co-founder was with Itiva from the early days till he became like his vice president for their global expansion. So these are some of the stories that we told, and it really helped to cement the fact that these guys are not, and they are not here to play. They really know their onions and they know exactly what they are doing. Also, I think after we sort of launched our first iteration, we started out trying to solve the payment on delivery problem. And then we built an escrow product where we can hold the funds and then both parties when they are satisfied. So 3 months into launching that product, we realized that the market was not ready for that product. I mean, shout out to everybody still trying to solve that problem today. But it was hard, like, it was not hard to sell to vendors, but it was hard to sell to their own customers, right? So the way we have now refined our story is to position as the founders that are able to pivot very quickly, understand when something is not working, and understand that the money in the bank, if you continue to spend it trying to push this product that is obviously not working, you are going to run out of funds quickly, and you are not going to generate revenue. So that is how we've been able to iterate and iterate our stories over the months.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So first of all, people need to recognize where you are in your journey, right? One of the things, storytelling as a buzzword, right? One of the things that is most important to understand in the concept of storytelling is that whoever you're speaking to or whoever is giving you audience, either by reading your pitch deck, your email, your investor update, or whatever, they want to understand where you are. They want to see the problem from your own sort of viewpoint, right? If you are communicating the problem or if you are communicating a fundraise element. So the first thing I try to do is to solve for relatability, right? If you are pitching to a non-African investor, for instance, you need to first of all bring that person into the context of Africa and say, yes, I understand that in the West, and you need to do your research enough so that you are speaking from an informed perspective. I understand that in the West or in Eastern Europe or North America or whatever, this is the norm. But in Africa, these are our own behaviors, right? And then that leads you into presenting what the problem is. So when somebody is consuming that information, either by way of listening to you or reading your email or reading your pitch deck, they first of all see the problem through your eyes. And that's sort of what the first step of storytelling is. Back in the days, if you're reading a novel and I read a lot of books as a kid, right? And the first page of the first chapter of most books is usually setting the context. So they'll tell you that, oh, okay, it was somewhere in America, this was the weather, this was normally how the birds would sing and stuff like that. So you insert or immerse yourself into the situation, and then you can sort of feel the context that the person or the writer was going for. So most of the time when you want to do your storytelling, I write my tweets in I don't use a lot of technical terms or buzzwords and stuff in writing my tweets because I want people to understand it and I know the audience that I'm speaking to. So yeah, I solve for relatability and, because I want the investor or the consumer of my information to understand my perspective and then now deliver my ask or whatever it is that I was going for. So yeah, I think those are the tips that I use to help deliver my stories.
Yeah, I think, first off, like, Seye said, I also try to consider the audience that I'm talking to, and you want to really speak from the perspective of the audience. So for example, aside just investors, even when we are talking to potential hires, right? So you're trying to convince somebody that is working in a very fancy place to join you. What kind of story do you tell the person? One of the techniques I like to use is like thinking about what the future can be and then working backwards from today, right? So I would say, oh, this is what can potentially happen, or use a context or a country where it's already existing and then say, what if we could have that here? That is what we are trying to build. And I like to tell stories from different angles. So for example, I could tell it even from the perspective of the name of the company. People always ask, why Sycamore? And I'll tell them the story of the tree and how Zacchaeus climbed the tree in the Bible to see Jesus, and they're like, wow, so inspirational. It's not that deep. It's just, it's just what it is, right? So typically I would come from that angle. Sometimes we'll talk about how we started from our living room, depending on who you are talking to, right? So I think it depends on the audience. It's sometimes we go to the future and we come back to the past and then we walk backwards in terms of what we're trying to build. And for me, I've always been big on being myself and really just imputing humor. Interestingly, something Seye said is very, very funny, where I was one of the few people cracking jokes on LinkedIn before LinkedIn had a laugh emoji. In fact, I could go to one of my old posts that says, somebody said, Tunde, we need to create a laugh emoji just because of you on LinkedIn, right? And I always laugh because I always say it's funny, like I was already using jokes on LinkedIn before it became a thing, right? So being myself has always helped. And then thinking about the audience, going to the future and working backwards to the past in terms of what we're trying to build. Thank you.
Yeah, as a founder here, you know, a non-technical founder, one of your biggest responsibilities is to sell everything, right? You sell your vision, you sell your product, you sell the future you're trying to create, right? For the people who you consider to be your audience. So beyond even the broad, open-ended, just speaking to the public or speaking into the void about your company, when you identify talent, and you know, they say people work for different reasons. You know, most of the time, or a lot of the time, I don't know if it is most, people are not going to join your company just because of the money you can pay them, right? It's a big factor, but it's not the only factor. The other things that help people make a decision on whether they want to join you to build this thing is sort of what they will get from it beyond the money, right? The legacy, the career growth, or whatever it is that inspires them at that point in time. Your job as a founder, or the guy who is going to get that person to change their mind or, you know, develop an idea, is to sell the future or the vision of what you are working on and what part they contribute or how they contribute to creating that future. So you yourself must understand your vision so well, and you must have, you know, practiced it. You must practice that actual selling it to somebody several times. So in the earlier days, I sold my vision to anybody who cared to listen, not only because I wanted them to have an idea or come and join me or whatever. It was because I also want to get better at it, right? I wanted to speak and, you know, use people as a soundboard to see how they also sort of created vision in their minds from my storytelling to them. So that's important. You need to be able to do that in your sleep. You need to, you need to meet somebody in a coffee shop who's just there to do his work, and then a conversation, starts between you and the person, and you've already perfected the job of selling the future or selling the vision to the person to the point where you can even identify points of value exchange, right? Either the person introduces you to somebody or the person is even willing to do some work for you. So founders need to imbibe that vision into themselves and the communication of it such that it's like Inception, right? The idea of Inception, the movie, was that I will plant an idea in you, even though it's my idea, I will plant an idea in you to the point that, as deeply as I can, to the point that you feel like it is your own idea. It is that job, that inception of, transferring that thinking of vision into the person that is the storytelling or the selling of the vision or selling of the future. So you need to just be great at it through practice.
I'm just going to add a few points. So for me, it's a little bit different. I feel like the journey of starting Middleman or getting people to come on board really started from even when we were doing our 9 to 5, right? So before, let's assume somebody approaches me and they tell me that they want me to join their company, I would definitely look at their track record, right? Look at what they've done before. Is it really worth taking that bet? Is it really worth joining them? So I feel like our records sort of made it easier to convince people, and also being very real with them, right? Of course, we have worked with startups, but we've never really done this before, and they are like really young people just like us. So it was easy to say that, guys, this is like, we are just going to be figuring this thing out together on the journey, right? And then for people that then now come after that, that is where the storytelling of showing people what we are doing, what we've achieved so far, and also the dream as well, where we are trying to go, the impact that we are trying to make, and then that begins to attract newer people into the company. But at the very first, at the very beginning, it's more about showing these guys what we've done before, the potential of the business, and also letting them know that it's going to be a wild ride. Are you ready to do this with us? We are all going to be figuring it out together, and sort of let them know that at the end of the day, we are all just going to do our best work. Yeah.
Yeah, anytime I hear this question, I remember this show. I don't know how many of us have seen Suits, a legal drama, right? Many people have watched it. Harvey Specter used to say something. He would say, "You play the man, not the odds," right? That I think resonates with me, especially in the context of this question, because customers, potential employees, they are people, right? So if you take a cue from Harvey and he says play the man, you want to understand who is this person and what is important to them. Everybody is not just an employee. Everybody is either a father, a husband, a brother, a tennis player, a movie watcher, a startup enthusiast, right? So there are so many parts of everybody. People have different parts of their lives, not just their work. So my own approach in trying to reach and appeal to people is to really understand them. What else drives this person apart from just the work? I mean, money is important, very, very important. Is the most, in fact, when people say, apart from money, what do you want? They'll say, is that money you left there? That's the one I want, right? So, but apart from that, people always have other things. Some people, being able to come to work at a certain time is important to them. Some people really like titles. Some people really like work-life balance. People want different things. So knowing how to craft your story and your narrative, depending on who that person is, I think is very important in the way you appeal to that person. And obviously, you can't tell the person what doesn't exist. If you guys resume by 9 a.m., you can't tell the person because he wants to be working by 12 p.m., then you now lie to the person. That's not the case, right? But you need to know what are the best parts of your story or your business or what you are building that best aligns with what the person considers to be important. But you wouldn't know that if you don't try to understand who the person is. I think that really works.
Thank you very much. We'll soon be heading to the Q&A section, so please let's prep our questions. But before we do that, I know we've said what should happen, but I'm also curious to know about what are common pitfalls and mistakes that you see other people do, or maybe you made them yourself, right? Pitfalls, common errors that people make in terms of storytelling. I'll start with.
I think, and I already touched on it really. So a story is a narrative. So what I mean is a narrative. We're all here talking about years of business, and we have to collapse it into 1 or 2 minutes. So we have to narrate it, and we have to say it in a very compelling way that makes sense, right? So there's this thing called narrative fallacy, where because you are trying to squeeze a very complicated, and maybe the story is not even a straight line, it was more like jaga jaga, but you want to tell it in a way at the startup expo that is very sweet and people will clap and people will laugh. You then tend to add sugar, Maggi, salt, or remove, maybe some very critical things, right? So I think many of us, we fall victim to that, and even recently, I think I saw a tweet from Omolara about, talking about some founders that tend to, blow up. You guys don't laugh, please. For those of you that follow on Twitter, you know what I'm talking about. So I think that's a pitfall because there's a tendency to maybe over-exaggerate. But I think there's also a tendency to underplay yourself too, which was one of the mistakes I made when we started, right? I was extremely conservative, extremely so, like, I didn't want to say anything that we couldn't do. I didn't want to talk too much. I just wanted to be the cool guy that is telling the truth. And, recently something happened. Even this Cascador funding that we won recently, we were going to apply for maybe less than 5 times the amount because I just wanted to be, conservative. I don't want to waste anybody's money. And the guy looked at our books and he said, Tunde, you're wasting time. Like, you guys should be doing ×5 of this amount, right? And even said that ×5 is too small. So yes, as much as don't exaggerate, but also don't undersell yourself. There should be a balance in telling the right story. And I think if you try to find that balance, you'll be spot on. Thank you.
Yeah, the point Babatunde made about not exaggerating, is really important. I mean, it's better to under-promise and then over-deliver. So when it comes to like storytelling for your customers, just state exactly what you are capable of doing, right? And don't oversell in such a way that they then come and experience the product and it's not exactly the same thing. Also, in terms of mistakes I see people make, I don't think it's more of a mistake, but I also see people overthink storytelling. This is not like a red circle kind of thing or wedding party kind of storytelling. Like, it's just as simple as me sharing how I met my co-founder. It's as simple as my interaction with a customer. How there was a time, so at the early days of being a founder, right, you are definitely doing a lot of work, customer support and all of that. And there was a time I was doing customer support and I interacted with a customer so much that she loved the service and she decided to reward me for doing my job with her time. Like, I tried to stop her from doing it, but she insisted. And so I put up the story on LinkedIn. Like, that kind of story signals to an investor that we take customer support very seriously. It signals to a potential customers that they are going to be treated well. It signals to potential partners that we are also going to treat them well if we enter a partnership. And those are the little stories that you tell. Is Seye just sharing how he had to chase a potential customer for months, going to their office, sitting down there. It's just like the little everyday things that happen in your life, that happen in your business, the journey, the lessons. I went for a pitch competition. I was the only female. I came out to tell that story to say, oh, I would love to see more female founders as well doing some of these competitions. So don't overthink it, to be honest. It's just you going on social media today to share what you've learned here today. It's the little things. It doesn't have to be grand at all. And those are like the mistakes that I see people make. But personally, I've not really made like personal mistakes that I can think of, and it's not coming from a place of like perfection or anything like that. It's coming from a place of even thinking that I'm not doing enough, I'm not telling enough story, even though on the outside it might look like I'm doing enough. I feel like there's still so much to be told, especially when it comes to like our employees. I feel like we are not telling their story enough, the guys that are doing the work in the back end, and I just hope to like be able to do that, more of that going forward.
Thanks. I mean, my response borrows a little bit from what both of you have said. But I just want to I want to define something. So storytelling as it is sales and marketing, right? The idea of storytelling is it follows just the tenets of the regular sales and marketing processes, right? Because at the end of the day, the reason you are telling your story is you are solving for an outcome. You want something to happen, right? So if you think about sales and marketing, it starts from awareness, or if you're a salesperson, prospecting, and then you gather the people who have interest in your business, all the way to negotiation, down to converting them into your actual customers. So it's basically the same thing with storytelling. So at the initial stages, and I'll tell it from a personal standpoint, at the initial stage, you are, just spray and pray. You're just putting your story out there. You're just talking. Whatever channels are available to you, you are using those channels and resources to tell your story. As you grow in your journey, and because the question is about avoiding pitfalls and mistakes, as you grow in your storytelling and grow in your influence, whether you are a business or just a public profile, right? You need to now recognize your impact at every stage of your journey, right? And then regulate. And again, like I said, I'll tell you from a personal perspective. It's in two ways. On Twitter, you guys know the whole story. Some people here may know the story of somebody accosting me and saying I did not give him money, right? So because of the way I've told my story, like putting myself out there and talking continuously, the person now realizes, oh, okay, because I'm a part of this guy's story, he owes me attention or he owes me audience, right? It's fine. People can do that. But as the person who is telling the story, if you recognize your impact across your journey, you may need to regulate. If you are in the early stages, it's great. Just, like I said, compare it to the process of sales and marketing and understand where you are in that process. Now, internally, in my own organization as well, as you can imagine, the way I talk about my story publicly, I say that internally as well. We are so free with information, right? People attend management meetings. We talk about the health of the company and things like that. And even when we're in a strong position as well, I communicate all those things clearly. What can start to happen is that people can also develop narratives in their head, narratives of entitlement, whatever, based on their own personal biases, right? And demand that you allude to those biases, right? So in storytelling, that in summary, understand where you are. And my entire gist in this response is about avoiding mistakes, so that you know when to not overshare, when to actually overshare, because oversharing can be an advantage sometimes, but also when to regulate as you grow in your own influence. I hope I made that clear.
Thank you very much. Now to the audience. Any questions? Mike. Yeah.
Okay, hi. My name is Osinachi. I'm an AWS cloud engineer. So I follow Lara and Seye online a lot, and particularly Seye. So and
Please follow Tunde too. Please follow him too.
But I've noticed that I've gone to many of your events, and your physical persona, let me use that word, is almost very, very different from your online persona. But that's besides the point.
Hey.
Yes. Like, I don't know if anybody resonates with what I'm saying, but yeah, somehow I don't really think too much.
We'll explain.
No. But yeah, I have a lot of questions. Yeah, like I've been wanting to ask them to any one of you though, but I'll just ask three. I hope that's okay. The first one is, how did you learn to structure your storytelling? Like, would you say your sales and marketing, because you mentioned how the similarities between sales and marketing, or the skills required for sales and marketing, and how that aligns with storytelling. Would you say that is all it takes to be a good storyteller? Then my second question is, you mentioned stuff about communicating with investors, communicating with your users, communicating with employees. Where do you draw the line between where you yourself communicates with them and where another person takes like the PR from you? Then my third question is,
I'm so sorry, my brother. I will not even remember the second question. Let's start with the first one, right?
Okay.
The first one says,
how did you learn to storytell? Yeah.
Good. If you listen to what Tunde said, he said, be yourself, right? First. If you are yourself and you understand your end goal, what you are solving towards, then you would decide on the channels that work for you, right? In the early days, Twitter of 160 characters did not work for me, right? And even though some people said it was because I was not intelligent enough to communicate my thoughts in 160 characters, in my own storytelling, I like to build a premise, bring you into that context, and then deliver my, whatever it was, my call to action or whatever. 160 characters did not allow me to do it. So I was having a good time on LinkedIn, Facebook, and I used to write on Medium and Substack. But I had only like 10 people reading that stuff. And then when Twitter went from 160 to 320, I think, right? Before they made it unlimited, or, it's a lot now. They doubled it, I think, from 160 to 320. I now was able to do my natural way of talking about my story within that 320 characters, right? They expanded the character limit to accommodate my intelligence. So, so in being yourself, right, you will find the channels that work for you. And then if you are consistent enough in your storytelling, and I just had something I was doing that I could talk about every day forever, right? Forget the 9 tweets I write every day. I can write 25,000 tweets every day about my work. There's so much, right? So that was consistent enough over time for me to now start seeing the influence or, getting the returns from doing that communication, right? Do you get it?
Yeah, so there's no like process or like how you curate.
At the back, there's structure to it. Like I said, it follows sales and marketing. So study marketing, right? Awareness, interest, decision, acquisition, retention, all of those things. Even if it is in granular ways, things compared to that model, right? So there are times when we launch a new product, right? When we launch Enrich Access, instead of writing a press release, I wrote a very long tweet, right? It was like an essay, right? Because Twitter Blue allows me to do that. Because I knew that my audience was there, or a lot of my audience was there. The guys who are not on Twitter, we have the ways of reaching them. We reach them via email, LinkedIn, video, all that stuff, right? But the one-on-one personal type communication, so that I can strike that balance of relatability between myself and my audience, I do that on that particular channel. So there is actual structure to it, right? You choose the channel, it's very scientific, it's very intentional. You need to do those things because it has to work for you. The moment you are doing marketing in a way or storytelling in a way that is not original to your person, you would lose steam or lose consistency, and then it does not deliver. That consistency is important. So it has to stem from the originality of your being.
Yeah,
You
so
get me?
I think that kind of boils down to my second question. Like, where do you draw the line between what you handle, like the line of communication you handle, maybe email, LinkedIn or stuff, and you mentioned something about it being about who you are and what you are projecting to your customers or your users or your employees. So where do you draw the line between the line of communication you have with your whoever you're communicating to, and when do you give that to an employee to handle? Something like that. I don't know if that's a question.
Okay, I would take this second question, then I would even touch on your first one. I think Seye is a natural, right? So, I mean, some of us had to put in more structure to do the little that we've done. The second one now, I think Tunde, the brand, is different from Sycamore. I think that's a very important distinction to make. So when I write about things that interest me, right? And I think a lot of people do too. It's not only about your business, right? So if I want to write, for instance, I have a book on economics. I've never met Seye to know that he likes perfumes, right? These are all things that interest us. So I write about the economy, I write about startups, I write about career because I worked for almost 10 years before I started a business. Those are things that interest me. But something that also helped me in terms of structure was picking things that I won't write about. Because when I was struggling to write, I noticed that there was a lot of noise online about what people want you to talk about. So when I wanted to actively start writing, that was in 2020, I wrote a few things that I will not talk about. Let me even tell you. Politics, stayed away. Religion, stayed away. Feminism, stayed away. Because these are, like, in my opinion, polarizing topics, right? And it's fine if you have the bandwidth. I read about these things, don't get me wrong. And if you have the bandwidth to debate and argue about them, please go there. You will even get more traction, because these are things that when you give a hot take about, 1 million people can follow you in one day, right? But me, I was sticking to boring things that I like. I can talk about movies. This have a spectacle. Write it. CBN released a new policy. I'll write about it. Tech Points released an interesting article. I'll write about it. Those are things I care about. In fact, before I had a structure. Monday, I talk about motivation. Tuesday, I talk about career. Wednesday, I post about Woman Crush Wednesday, my wife. Thursday, I talked about Throwback Thursday. Friday, I talked about economics. That was my structure for 2 years. I didn't break it. And that was how, I got thousands of followers on other platforms. Because of this, my restriction, I never really caught on Twitter as much as I was always active there. I followed fantastic people, most people here, Omolara through Middleman, Seye through PaidHR. But I always struggled with how, I don't want to use the word toxic, but I've used it already. But how intense a lot of times. So I just step out, I go to other platforms, I come back, and that structure actually worked for me. And when I'm talking about these things, nothing concerns Sycamore. Sycamore is product launch, customer education, thought leadership. But if I want to talk about Harvey Specter, or I want to talk about something that I like, my wife, for example, nothing concerns Sycamore with that one. So I have things I write about that are about Tunde as a person and not necessarily the business. And that ties to the brand sometimes, because a lot of times you want to humanize the brand a little bit. You don't want to look stiff, like you don't have any interest. You're all about selling market every single day, right? And I like what Seye said too. It's about relatability. And even Omolara mentioned it about where you worked at before. That might not necessarily be the startup, but that is you. You are distinct from your business, even if you guys are tied together. Sorry for the long answer, I beg. Thanks.
As in, just to back up what you said, everything has an audience, right? Everything, you just need to find that audience, right? If you want to talk about, for me, for instance, surprisingly, I don't know anything about crypto, right? But there are people who can write an entire thesis, white paper on crypto. If you are well researched and well versed in the topics of gender equality, feminism, and stuff like that, by all means, talk about it, right? But what you don't want to do is to lose your authenticity, right? And then, somebody challenges you and you cannot back up your statements with facts. So that's why I say it comes from being yourself. What you are comfortable with, what you know that you know, you can communicate it. Just be consistent. You find your audience.
So my last question, sorry, is how you mentioned something about like how oversharing sometimes helps. You mentioned something about how oversharing sometimes works and how you have to know when to do that. Like, can you just talk a little bit more about that? Like, where do you draw the line between what you share online and what you don't share?
Yeah, I mean, I already sort of touched on it, right? So if you recognize where you are in your journey, right, you will know, not anybody else. For instance, my first ever insanely viral tweet was me talking about myself and my wife playing Call of Duty, right? It went, I think, almost 800 million views. It went all over the world. Till today, people still just go and talk about it, and I see it on Reddit and stuff like that. And then, he had hundreds of thousands of responses and comments and stuff like that. And people started to poke holes, right? Some people would twist your narratives towards angles that you never thought of. So as time went on, as your influence starts to grow, at this time, in 2022, I had less than 1,000 followers on Twitter. I had 900 and something followers on Twitter. 3 years after, I have almost 20,000, right? So now, I'm very careful. I don't really talk about my wife again. Because if you insult my wife, I will fight you. All bets are off, right? I will start shaping for you on Twitter. So you will know, as it relates with your journey, what your influence is and when the interests that you were doing those things for have already been served. Do you get me?
All right. Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't take more questions because we are out of time. Well, I'll make time for my own question. I just have one question. All right. I'm sorry.
This is the nepotism they used to talk about.
So what is your take on founders outsourcing their storytelling? I know two founders, right? They're just starting a company. They have the money to do it.
Outsourcing their what?
Their storytelling. Okay. I think one of them works at Visa, one works at OpenAI, right? And they are starting a startup. So do you think, and I'm trying to tell them it doesn't really make sense it's something you should do by yourself. That is what I feel. So I want to get your take on that.
Okay, so I'm not sure I would advise anyone to outsource it. I feel like for situations where you have like two co-founders, one person should be comfortable doing it. I don't know who Seye's co-founder is till today. Seye is the outspoken one. And in my own situation, my co-founder was the first to leave his full-time job. So he was doing more of the storytelling at the time. He was like the face of the brand at the time. And I had my 9 to 5. I sort of had to respect my employer. Even though I talk about Middleman, I was not putting it in their face, right? So it's just about them, to be honest. When you're keeping your 9 to 5 job, I don't think it's respectful to your employer to keep talking about your startup all the time. So if you are two people, I would always advise that you find someone comfortable sharing about your journey. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, so the question is what I think about people that outsource their storytelling, right? Outsource, like get a ghostwriter?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, to be honest, I was approached for things like that in the early days, like, oh, I'm going to write 10 tweets per day. I'm like, bro, it's not going to be authentic, right? It's just going to be some plastic side of stuff. They say, founders XYZ, here's a thread or a mega thread and things like that. Those things don't work for me in my own context, right? It may work for other people. I think you lose a great deal of authenticity, which is a main ingredient in your storytelling. So yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also cutting short your answer because you
All right.
overrode other people's questions.
All right, thank you very much.